Hi, everyone. I'm making this recording to catch up anyone that might have missed class or missed a portion of class because you were booted off of the Zoom session. Zoom had issues all day, so if you were one of those that got booted off, please know that it wasn't anything that you were doing wrong. It was just widespread outages throughout the day today. So I want to make a quick video, an introductory video, just talking about all of the stuff that we went over in class today. So if you look up here, the first thing that we talked about was attendance, so I'll go over that with you. We did a little activity, I'll call it, but not really, on what is chemistry. I talked a little bit about what it's going to be like learning in the virtual environment, a brief tour of Schoology, a getting to know you and me type activity, and I talked a little bit about the online textbook, some options for submitting assignments, and then there's a homework assignment at the very end. So what I would like to do is to begin by talking about attendance. So my goal for this course is to make this as close to what you would experience in our actual building as possible. So every class meeting, we will join a Zoom session, we'll get together, and we might be learning new content, we might be doing a lab, but every class meeting is going to have some synchronous component. Synchronous meaning we're both on here at the same time, unlike right now where you are watching this as a recording. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about attendance. So I plan to hold live sessions for each meeting. Sometimes we'll be together for the entire block period. Sometimes we'll be on and off depending on what we're doing. The second thing, and I appeal to you, please, 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 if you could, please turn your cameras on. It was so cool. I just got done doing a lesson. All the students had their cameras on. It was so much more interactive and real, unlike talking to just a list of names. And something that I mentioned in here, one of the difficulties that I have this year that I didn't have at the end of last year is that at the end of last year, I had taught my students from September through March. So even if they just showed a name, I knew who that name was. Right now, when I'm looking at names, I don't know any of you. This is not to be mean or anything, I just don't know you yet. So that also helps us get to know each other a lot better, a lot faster. But I completely understand there are certainly circumstances that may cause you to not want to turn your camera on. And if you don't want to do that, I'm fine with it. No one's going to be penalized for keeping their camera off. It just helps us interact better if you do have it on. Last thing, if you are unable to make a class for whatever reason, if something comes up, if you have a doctor's appointment, you're sick, you need to go take your sister, mother, grandmother somewhere, it doesn't matter. Just let me know. Just like if you miss class at school, there's going to be assignments that need to be made up, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So if you miss class for whatever reason, and many of you have done this already, reached out to me, email letting me know I couldn't get onto the Zoom, that's completely fine. Just let me know. Next part. Some information. The next two slides actually are information about using Zoom. This is not intuitive whatsoever. So it is not normal for me to be talking to a little tiny camera lens like this, and it's certainly not normal for you to be sitting in your house, bed, floor, wherever you're watching this and learning in that environment. This is very awkward for both of us. So some things that I want to point out about Zoom. Number one, if you're in a quiet space, feel free to leave yourself unmuted. It's sometimes frustrating for both you and I, because I just had this experience where I'm hitting the space bar to try and unmute myself and it's not working for whatever reason. So if you're able to leave yourself unmuted and it's nice and quiet, then go ahead and leave yourself unmuted. Otherwise, you can just hit the space bar, which is what I put here. You can quickly unmute yourself by holding down the space bar when you're talking. It'll allow you to speak, and then when you're done talking, you just let go of the space bar. Next, you must show your name in order to be admitted to the virtual classroom. So if you actually were able to get in today, one of the things that the school district is requiring us to do is to have you go into a waiting room first, and then we individually allow you or invite you into the room. That's just another safety procedure that's in place to make sure that someone that's not supposed to be in the classroom is not here. Next thing, you can use your reaction button at the bottom to give me either a thumbs up. So often I'm going to turn to this screen that I have on the side where my Zoom is laid out so I can see all of your little windows. And I'm going to say, does anyone have any questions? So if I'm looking that way, I'm looking at you guys on my screen. Does anyone have any questions? If you don't want to show your camera or speak, the least thing that I'm asking of you is that you raise your hand or give me a thumbs up or a clap or something that lets me know that someone on the other side of this computer is actually hearing and listening and processing what I'm talking about. So please do that. The other thing that I want, and that's a picture of like the two choices that are there. The other thing that you can do is you can raise your hand. So I'm going to talk about that now. So to raise your hand, you're going to select the participants option near the bottom of your screen. And then next to your name, there should be an option for more. And then under more, one of the options is raise your hand. The neat part about raising your hand as opposed to the thumbs up is your hand stays raised until you take it down. So unlike a thumbs up, which goes up and then disappears on its own, if you have a question, it's important that you raise your hand because I might not see your thumbs up initially, but I'll see your hand raised. And the screen actually gives me a little marker that says, Bob has raised his hand or Kevin has raised his hand. So that also helps me if you have a question, helps me to realize that you might have a question. The other way that you can ask a question is in the chat box. So when I'm doing these Zoom sessions, I keep my chat box open and on the side. You can either send me a chat, I think it's like privately. So if I see that and you sent it privately, I'm not going to say your name. If you post it to everyone, then I might say, oh, Heather has a question, you know, what does this mean? So just be aware that the chat feature is another way that you can ask questions of them. And then finally, the last one, number 7, says we're going to use breakout rooms. So breakout rooms work in 2 different ways. So either you're going to go into a breakout room as a group, or you're going to go into a breakout room as an individual. When you're in a breakout room as an individual, think about it like working at your desk by yourself. So if you're in a class and the teacher says, here's an assignment, I would like you to try problem number 1 on your own. That's like a breakout room for 1. And then what I'll do is I'll go around and meet with individual students, just like if we were in the classroom, I would walk up to you and say, hi, do you have any questions on this? You know, is there anything that I can help you with? If you're in a breakout room as a group, then there's 3, 4, 5 of you in there, then you can talk to each other. In either case, if you need help, whether you're working by yourself or whether you're working in a group, there's a help button at the bottom. And what that does is up on my screen pops up a name and it says this person needs help. And then I can join that room and answer any questions that you have. Hopefully that's clear. Okay, the next part. What is class going to look like? So one of the challenges that I'm facing right now is our shift to block scheduling. So block scheduling basically means that instead of having a 45-minute class period, we have an 80-minute class period, which is a significantly larger amount. And the other side of that is we are reducing the number of interactions that we have. So if we normally have school for 180 days, and I see all of you 5 days a week for those 180 days, there are a lot more class periods. Now that I'm seeing you every other day, we go from 180 all the way down to 90, one of which has already passed for most of you that had class with me today. So I only have 89 more classes to teach everything that I would normally teach in 181 more classes. So what is a class going to look like? We have introduction, attendance. I'm actually going to rely on Zoom to tell me the attendance, so please make sure that you're logging in. Then we're going to move on to new content. So this is the part where I'm going to teach you. It could also be reviewing homework, things like that. Practice activity. So whatever we learn, we're going to practice. We could be doing it as a group or as an individual. And then, as I mentioned, because each one class period is more like 1 3/4 class period, we're going to have some type of extension activity. So in a few weeks, we're going to learn about significant figures. Normally, that's 1 class period. In the second class period, we would learn about calculations with significant figures. Now in a block schedule, we're going to fuse those two things together. So I'm going to teach you about significant figures. We're going to practice. I'm going to teach you about calculating with significant figures, and we'll practice that. And then finally, there'll be some type of homework assignment. So every class period, we're going to have a short homework assignment. My goal is for it to take no more than 15 to 20 minutes. Usually if it's a math problem or that type of problem, it'll be like 2 or 3 problems max. Shouldn't take you more than 15 or 20 minutes. The only assignments that could be longer is if you have a post lab. So we're going to go on and talk about labs right now. So on a day when we have a double lab period, so there are 2 different scenarios depending on which class you're in. Either you're in a class where you have essentially a 3-hour block or a 2-hour and 50-minute, 2-hour and 40-minute block, or you're in my 3rd period class and you have a 1 period before lunch and 1 period after lunch. Either way, it's going to run very similar. So 2 things are going to happen. We're going to come together like we normally would in Zoom, and I am going to either go through the lab with you. So some of the labs are not simulations, they're actual labs that I have to do for you in class. So I'll record that, you'll watch the video, I'll answer any questions, you'll take down data, then you'll work on the post lab. The other type of lab that we might have is called a simulation. So a simulation, I would show you how to use the sim, then I would let you work in groups or on your own, you would complete that activity, and then we'd come back at the end of the period. So it might be 10 minutes for introduction, 10 minutes for a demo, then a block of time where you would be working on your own or in a small group, and then we would come together and wrap it up at the end. The other thing is, if you notice, lab activities are a little more extensive than a regular homework activity. So instead of 15 to 20 minutes, it might take you 20 to 30 minutes to wrap up a post-lab activity. So this is what the Schoology page looks like. What I did today with my students is I went through this first folder called Introduction. So I'm going to pause this video for a second. Okay, I'm back. So what we're going to do here is we are going to go through the different pieces of this. So if you notice, the first link at the top is the Accelerated Honors textbook. I'm going to talk about this in a few slides, but everyone's basically going to get their own username and password for using it. I'm going to click on this introductory material. And there's a bunch of different activities in here. So the first thing that I want to do, though, before we go on to any of the activities, is talk about the course expectations. So you can open this course expectations up on your own. My point in bringing this up is the following. In this first paragraph, I talk about how difficult and challenging chemistry is. Chemistry is probably one of the most notorious courses. If you ask someone who's in their 20s or 30s or 40s what they thought about chemistry, they would probably say one of 2 things. Either they loved it or they hated it, and almost all of them would say that it was very challenging, and some might say that it was even fun and enjoyable, depending on their own personal experience. But it's definitely something that's very challenging and that I think can also be very fun. But that's what I talk about here. The other part that I want to mention in here is this. If you are having trouble, if you get hung up on something, please don't wait for that misunderstanding to snowball. Chemistry builds on itself. So if you don't understand something small at the beginning, we're going to learn something that builds on top of that, and you won't understand that either, and then something else that builds on top of that, and pretty soon you're going to be really lost, and it's going to be hard to get you back to where you need to be. So please, if you have questions, ask, and ask often. Next, if I scroll down here a little bit, you're going to see a couple of things. So first of all, the required materials. So depending on how you prefer to take notes, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm not going to check your class notebook, but I do think there is some value in either typing out your responses or summarizing your thoughts as you read through this, or taking handwritten notes on a piece of paper. You'll need a graphing calculator or a scientific calculator, a pen or a pencil if you're writing out your notes. And then obviously the most important thing you need, at least this point in the year, is a computer with internet access. Again, if you're having internet access trouble, or if you're having trouble with your computer or logging into Zoom, please reach out to the technology department. They could really help you out a lot in that respect. Okay, the grading policy. So if you notice, there are 3 different categories that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to group together class participation and homework. It's going to count for 30%. The lab activities and the simulations that we do, those will count for about 30%. There's usually about 5 or 6 of those per marking period. And then finally, the last 40% will be tests and quizzes. So 3 components add up to 100%. So the grades are weighted. So it's not going to be as easy to just add up the points and figure out what your grade is. You have to take into account that some things are worth more than others. Next, it says all tests will be announced. Quizzes might be announced or unannounced. At least in this virtual format, they will be announced. It'll be different if we get back into the building and we're able to see each other on a regular basis. Next, homework. It's just some information here that as a department we put in all of our course expectations about homework. The fact that if you turn in an assignment late, you might receive reduced credit. Again, at the beginning, especially this year, I'm going to be extremely cognizant of all of these other issues that we're dealing with, internet problems and connectivity issues. So probably won't have to worry about too much of that, at least for right now. Then there's some behavioral expectations. So right now, the only behavioral expectation I have of you is that every class period you log into your Zoom and you ask any questions that you have of me. But other than that, when we get back into the classroom, we'll talk about do's and don'ts in terms of eating in the classroom and other things. And then finally, the makeup policy, which is here, talks about how to make up things, and same thing for labs. Okay. This is normally a point where I would pause and ask if you have any questions, but since you're watching this as a recording, you can pause it, and if you have questions, you can submit them to me through Schoology Messenger or through email. Or I have a new Calendly link. It's kind of awkward to say, and I hate it, but it allows you to schedule a meeting with me one-on-one. So if you're having difficulty, it would be the equivalent of you walking into my classroom either before school or after school to ask a question. All right, we're going to go back to the original slide. So at this point, what I'm asking of you is if you have not completed the getting to know you or me, depending on who's saying it, activity, I'm asking you to do that now. The other thing that I want to mention is there is a link to a video, a YouTube video called Getting to Know Me or You, I forget what I called it, where you find out information about me, just like I'm going to find out information about you from you filling out this form. So if you have not watched the video, it's only a few minutes long. It talks about some information, just random background information about me. And I am going to read through all of your responses and learn some background information about each of you that I'll use and integrate into what we do. All right, the next part. So I asked this question during class, and there is a textbook definition to this, and you don't have to write anything or respond at this point, but if I asked you, what is chemistry? That's what we're going to be learning about this year, but what actually is it? I got a lot of decent responses today, so there's a lot of vocab. So I heard atoms and molecules and reactions. So we are going to learn a lot over the course of a year. Hopefully we'll be back in the classroom for most of it. But what we're going to learn is a lot about really, really incredibly small things. Unlike what you're going to learn next year in physics, which is a lot about really, really big things for the most part. They talk about really small things as well. All right, so we'll talk about that. The next one that I want to mention here is your online textbook. So we have a copy of the textbook that can be found completely online. I'm going to send you a username and a temporary password. You're going to then update your password. You'll see a virtual copy of the book. They have other resources on there, practice quizzes, other examples, videos that you can watch. It's actually a really great textbook and comes with a lot of resources. Your first resource is me. So if you have a question, your best bet is to ask me. But if you have a question and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're not really sure where to go, the textbook is your best bet, because I will not answer the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, or the computer, or an email. However, the textbook will be there. Now, there is also a hard copy version for those of you that want it. There's really no need for the hard copy, since everything that is in the hard copy is online and so much more. But if you would like a hard copy of the textbook, you can pick that up during your material gathering time, either on September 1st or September 2nd. And Dr. Sherlock sent out information about that. So you can get that information from there or from the Henderson website. So this just talks about what the textbook has in it. I'm going to show you some of those features when we start using it. This next page talks about how we're submitting assignments. So one of the challenges last year when we went into this virtual learning environment was getting stuff, since we couldn't hand in papers or turn in lab notebooks, getting stuff from you to me in this new virtual setting. So I found that one of the most efficient ways was to use a file format, which all of you know about, which is called PDF. And what it allows you to do is take something and convert it into a digital format that can be submitted through Schoology. Now that something could be a bunch of different things. So some people last year chose to write out their answers, paper and pencil, on a sheet of paper. Well, that's great, as long as you can somehow get that sheet of paper into a digital version and then send it to me. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is we're going to use our phones, and either the Notes app if you have an iPhone, or something called Cam Scanner app, which is a free app if you have an Android phone. And what that does is allows you to basically take a picture of your document, to clean it up, so remove shadows, fix the formatting so it doesn't look like you took this picture you know, while it was on the floor of your bedroom, and it looks like any other document that you might be turning in. So that app will allow you to clean that up, and then you're going to submit that through Schoology. The other way that I'm going to get information from you is one of these other two, which is sometimes I'm going to give it to you as a PDF and you can type directly on it, or sometimes I'm going to give you a document as a Google Doc or a Google form or a Google slide presentation like what I'm going to share with you today. And in any of those cases, again, you can type directly into your computer in order to access that information. And again, submit it through Schoology. So I finished up with this. So aside from asking, again, pleading for any questions that you might have, the last assignment is another Google form, and we're not going to use Google Forms as much as we do today ever again. So you'll never have 2 Google Forms to fill out as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to ask you this. This second form asks for different information. So what your who your science teacher in science class was last year, what your science math class and math teacher, who they were last year, some information about sports and activities that you participate in. So that's what I'm looking for in this form. 2 homework assignments, essentially, if you're watching this now. The Getting to Know You activity, which is worth 10 points, and this student information and emergency contact form, which is also worth 10 points. All right, that is all for this video session. Thank you guys for watching this to the end. I'm sorry if you are one of the individuals that missed class today because of crazy Zoom problems, but I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.